Hello everyone, thank you for joining me. So I'm just going to wait a few minutes just to allow people a chance to join the broadcast. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Reba Peoples. I am a board-certified psychiatrist and founder of Amara Health and Wellness. Amara's mission is to empower you with the tools needed to become stewards of your own health and architects of your own destiny. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to invest in your own wellness by tuning into today's live stream. Just a quick legal disclaimer, any information provided through this live stream is intended for informational purposes only, and it does not constitute formation of a doctor-patient relationship. So you should always consult with your personal physician before starting any diet, exercise, or supplementation program, or if you feel that you may have a health problem. So today we're here to talk about sleep. So more specifically, I'm going to identify some of the habits that may be standing in the way of getting a restful night's sleep and provide some practical tools for shutting down mental chatter and sleeping with ease. So why is sleep so important? So sleep is very important in brain function and behavior. So when we're sleep deprived, we can have trouble making decisions, trouble solving problems, trouble controlling emotions and behavior, and even trouble coping with change. So sleep deprivation is really interpreted as stress by the body, which can activate our sympathetic nervous system and increase cortisol levels. And cortisol is one of our primary stress hormones. When cortisol levels are very high, we can actually have problems with that cortisol being actually toxic to our brain cells or neurons. Now, sleep is very important in the formation of memories. So the part of the brain called the hippocampus is responsible for converting memories from short-term into long-term memories. So people who do get enough sleep tend to have sort of a higher cortical density in the hippocampal areas. Now, during sleep, we also find that we're able to do some kind of basic housekeeping when we are sleeping normally. So our brains actually activate ion channels when we're sleeping. And these ion channels really help facilitate the flow of extracellular fluid into the brain. And one effect of this is that we're able to sort of wash out toxins, so to speak. And one of the things that accumulates in the brain is a protein called beta amyloid. And when we're getting enough sleep, we're actually able to decrease the amount of beta amyloid in our brain. So sleeping is actually neuroprotective and helps sort of protect us from developing things like dementia. Now, sleep also can help maintain a healthy balance of the hormones that help us feel hungry, as well as the hormones that help us feel satisfied after eating. So two primary hormones that sort of regulate appetite are called ghrelin and leptin. So ghrelin makes us feel hungry, whereas leptin helps us feel full and satisfied. So people who are getting enough sleep tend to have higher levels of leptin and lower levels of ghrelin. Now, sleep also has an important impact on our immune system. It also helps regulate our blood sugar balance. So people who are sleep deprived are actually at a higher risk of developing diabetes. And sleep is also important for just general safety. So when we are sleep deprived, our bodies do find ways of compensating for that. So we can actually have what are called microsleeps, where you'll just sort of sleep for seconds at a time. And this is dangerous in terms of driving if you're operating heavy equipment or machinery. So there's a much higher likelihood of automobile accidents and workplace-related accidents when people are sleep deprived. So we definitely want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to make sure that we're getting adequate sleep at night. So one of the things that's really important in sleep is getting adequate sleep hygiene. So we want to make sure that we're sleeping enough. So it varies from person to person, but for all of those benefits that were mentioned before, we generally need an average of anywhere between 7 and 9 hours of sleep nightly. And this is because many of those benefits happen when we're in the deeper, more restorative phases of sleep. And we tend to sleep in cycles, and each cycle gets progressively longer throughout the night. So if you're only sleeping 4 hours or so, you're not getting as many of those sleep cycles that help get you into those deeper restorative phases of sleep. So as far as kind of proper sleep hygiene, you want to make sure that you're on a schedule, a regular schedule. So trying to fall asleep and wake up around the same time each night and each morning. And the reason for this is our bodies actually operate on an internal clock. So we call this a circadian rhythm. And we want to make sure that that clock is functioning appropriately. So if we're sleeping at sporadic times every day, then that can really throw off our internal balance. So a lot of times people think that, if they don't get enough sleep during the week, then they can sort of make it up by sleeping in on the weekends. And actually, you really want to make sure that you're sleeping on a regular schedule, so every day of the week. You also want to make sure that you're aware of those electronic devices. So our sleep schedules, so our circadian rhythms, are really sort of dictated by the light and dark cycles outside. So when the sun is out, the sun actually suppresses melatonin production in our brains. And melatonin is one of our primary sleep hormones. It really helps tell the body that it's time to slow down and wind down and fall asleep at night. Now, when we are exposed to artificial sources of light, light actually suppresses that melatonin production, so we can feel not tired if we're doing things like, playing on Facebook or playing video games or on our smartphones at night. That really sort of disrupts that natural melatonin production. So you want to make sure that you're powering down those electronic devices about an hour before you're planning to fall asleep. And that way you make sure that you're able to sort of naturally produce your melatonin so that you can fall asleep at night. Now, for those of you who can't bear to part with your electronic devices, there are glasses that you can wear that can actually block out the blue light that tends to suppress melatonin. So those are called computer glasses or blue light blocking glasses. So you can get them pretty inexpensively on Amazon, so anywhere from $10 for an inexpensive pair all the way up to $80 to $90 for the more higher end versions. Now, you also want to be aware of your caffeine intake. So if you are drinking a lot of caffeine, especially later in the afternoon, caffeine is a stimulant, so that can also really impact your ability to get a restful night's sleep. Food-wise, you want to make sure that you're eating regularly throughout the day. So if you're hypoglycemic, that can actually prevent you from sleeping well throughout the night. So you want to make sure that you're getting several small meals throughout the day rather than one or two really big meals during the day. You also want to be aware of exercise. So strenuous exercise actually increases cortisol levels in your body, and cortisol is one of our primary stress hormones. And when cortisol levels are high, that actually also impacts your ability to fall asleep and maintain sleep. Now, with electronic devices, all electronic devices emit something called electromagnetic radiation. And electromagnetic radiation can impact our brainwaves, essentially. So when people do have a lot of exposure to EMRs, They can also have difficulty getting into those deeper restorative phases of sleep. So you want to think about, where is your Wi-Fi router? If that's in your bedroom, you want to make sure that you move that away from where you're sleeping. A lot of us also tend to use our cell phones as alarms. So if you're sleeping with your cell phone next to your head at night, you want to make sure that it's in airplane mode so that you're not getting that exposure to the EMRs from the 3 or 4G, as well as from the your router. Now, you also want to make sure that you're using your bed only for sleeping. So a lot of times we tend to watch television in bed or read in bed or those sorts of things, and that's kind of confusing for our brains. So you want to make sure that the bed is primarily used only for sleeping, and that way when you're in bed, it really sends a signal that it's time to rest, it's time to wind down, and it's time to fall asleep. You also want to think about incorporation of some sort of mindfulness practice before going to bed at night. So finding a way to really sort of wind down and calm down before bedtime really helps you get into a more relaxed state so that you can more easily fall asleep. And you can definitely make use of technology to help with that process. So the Insight Timer, for example, is a free app that you can download. There are literally thousands of free guided meditations on the app. One of the really good ones for sleep initiation is one called the Yoga Nidra meditation, but there are several other meditations that you can take advantage of to help you relax and fall asleep before bedtime. Another great app is one called Calm, C-A-L-M. That's also a free app that can be used to help with relaxation just before bedtime. And then the Inner Balance device. So this is an app through HeartMath, and that's also a way to help with sort of relaxing your body. Oh, thank you, Frida. I appreciate your taking the time to tune in. And definitely, if there are any questions or things that come up, feel free to share in the comment section. Now, another way to help sort of quiet your mind before bedtime is to journal. So, a lot of times we have all sorts of thoughts that are just sort of running through our minds before we fall asleep. So keeping a journal next to your bedside and just sort of writing everything down to clear it from your mind before falling asleep can also be really powerful for helping you be able to sort of wind down and get to sleep at night. Now, so sleep hygiene is definitely important. Incorporating a relaxation practice, definitely important. And if all else fails, you can also supplement. And there are several supplements that can be very useful in helping with sleep initiation. One of those supplements is called melatonin. And melatonin it's a hormone. So it's one that's naturally produced in our own brains, but we can also take it in supplement form to help us with sleep and relaxation prior to bedtime. Now, the caveat with melatonin is it's really intended to be used short term only. So you don't want to use melatonin as an everyday supplement. So it's great if say you're traveling and you have some issues with being able to sort of recalibrate after you're going across time zones, or if you're a shift worker and you've recently changed your shift, melatonin short term might be helpful in sort of reestablishing those circadian rhythms. But because it is a hormone, you want to be careful about long-term use of melatonin. Valerian is another supplement that can be very useful. So it helps decrease sleep latency, meaning the amount of time that it takes to actually fall asleep once you do lie down. Another is called inositol. Inositol, we're not quite sure how inositol works. The thinking is that it does sensitize serotonin. receptors in your brain. Serotonin is a precursor to melatonin, which is the hormone that helps us fall asleep. You do want to be careful with inositol if you have bipolar disorder. So inositol can actually trigger mania in people who do have an underlying bipolar disorder. L-theanine is another supplement that can be very useful. L-theanine also increases serotonin levels, and it also increases dopamine and GABA. GABA is one of our what we call inhibitory neurotransmitters, so it helps induce a sense of calm and relaxation. The interesting thing about L-theanine is that it increases dopamine while decreasing norepinephrine. So you can have a sense of clarity and calm and focus without feeling sort of revved up or anxious. One caution with L-theanine is that it can lower blood pressure. So if you're taking blood pressure medications, you want to be aware of that potential interaction. GABA is another supplement that's commonly prescribed. Now, GABA actually doesn't really effectively cross the blood-brain barrier. So when we do take it as a supplement with the thoughts of it increasing GABA in our central nervous system, it actually doesn't. It's not very effective at doing that. But we do know that GABA does alter brainwave patterns. So when people do take GABA, they tend to have an increase in alpha waves. So those are the kind of relaxation brain waves, and a decrease in beta waves. So those are the brain waves that are primarily predominant when we're, alert and learning. GABA can cause headaches in some people, so that's one thing to be aware of. Now, magnesium is another supplement that really helps with sleep and relaxation. Magnesium can actually help decrease cortisol levels and increase relaxation. Now, magnesium in very, very high doses can be cardiotoxic, but you would have to really take a lot of magnesium for that to happen. Passion flower is another supplement that people can have benefit with. It's thought that it influences receptors, the same receptors that benzodiazepines influence. And benzodiazepines are tranquilizing medications like Ativan or Xanax or that whole family of medications. Now, passion flower can also lower blood pressure, so you do want to be careful of that. Another ingredient that you'll often find in sleep aids is something called hops. And hops has anti-inflammatory, antioxidant properties, and it can also alter brainwave activity. So you see an increase in delta waves with hops. And delta waves are those slow waves that we get when we're in the deepest phases of sleep. Chamomile is also commonly used to help with sleep. That works by binding GABA receptors, which is that inhibitory neurotransmitter. Zinc can also be effective. The thinking is that zinc actually helps improve depression. So people who do have an underlying depression oftentimes have difficulty getting restful sleep. So if we can kind of correct the underlying depression, then oftentimes sleep can also follow. Another supplement that you'll often see added in sleep aids is something called 5-HTP or 5-hydroxytryptophan. This is a serotonin precursor, and serotonin is the precursor to melatonin. So by giving 5-HTP, we're kind of indirectly influencing melatonin levels in the brain. You want to be very careful about 5-HTP if you're already prescribed an antidepressant that impacts serotonin, because you can have an interaction where there's actually too much serotonin in the brain, and that can be dangerous. And lastly, vitamin B6 can be helpful with sleep initiation. The thinking is that vitamin B6 can also help with serotonin production. Oh, thank you very much, Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining. So, and if you did join in late, I will post the replay on my page, so you can always go back and hear all of the information from the beginning as well. And now we're talking about B vitamins, particularly B6. Now, B6 has actually in some preliminary studies been shown to improve depressive symptoms in postmenopausal women. So again, it's more of that, you know, if depression might be an underlying cause of the insomnia, restoring B6 levels can possibly be helpful with treating the depression and therefore helping treat the sleep. You do want to be careful with B6 if you're taking it in the form of a B complex. And this is because other B vitamins actually are quite activating. So B12 and folates are sort of energizing B vitamins. So if you are taking a B complex in hopes of getting that B6 impact, you want to make sure you're taking it in the morning rather than at bedtime, because those other B vitamins can disrupt sleep. Another issue with high doses of B6 is that it can cause something called peripheral neuropathy. So that's a numbness and tingling in your fingertips and toes. And it's reversible, and the way that you treat it is by reducing the B6 dose. So now that you know some easy ways to improve sleep without prescription medications, hopefully you'll incorporate some of those things tonight. And before I sign off, I'm just going to see if there are any questions from anyone. Is there anything that anyone would like to ask before I do sign off? And also, I'd like to know kind of what sleep hygiene practices you guys are going to implement tonight. So you can definitely share that as well in the comment section. I would love to hear from you. And as a recap, so it's really important to remember that sleep hygiene is super important, including limiting exposure to those electronic devices just before bedtime. You also want to think about creating a bedtime ritual just before bedtime, and incorporating a relaxation practice. And when all else fails, you can consider adding a sleep promoting supplement. Just make sure to always check with your medical provider or pharmacist before starting any new supplement. And this is to avoid any potential medication interactions or other risks associated with that particular supplement. Hello, Hannah. Thank you so much for joining. So I'm just about to sign off, but I will be posting the video onto the Amara Facebook page, so you can always go back and listen to the replay. And if you did like this video, be sure to like the page. That way you'll be notified of future live streams. And if you think that someone you may know might find this information helpful, be sure to share it with your friends. So be well, and God bless everyone. Thank you. Bye.